Happy International Horse Day.
Yeehaw. Happy Music Month. Happy Black Music Month. Happy
Happy Black
Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Caribbean Heritage.
Happy Caribbean Heritage Month. Happy, happy, happy. So yesterday was International Horse Day. Um, we decided that we would celebrate by bringing on our dear friend Cinnamon Love, who is a legend in the game.
Legendary.
Maybe Google her, but not on your work computer.
You may have seen her in. Trust me, you'll be a fan too. We're huge fans. You'll be a fan. Hall of Famer, just amazing, amazing, amazing woman all around.
Yes, activist,
Mhm.
writer,
Yeah,
does
producer,
producer,
director,
everything. She does it all. You would think
multi
she's
hyphenate.
Jamaican, right? Basically, she's a star. So she's
She
going to
is a
join us
star.
tonight so that we can talk about Under the Cherry Moon, a Prince movie from 1986. Nikki
Hmm.
and I had never seen it before. Cinnamon actually chose this movie specifically for International Horrors Day because she wanted to talk about the depiction of male sex workers. So when she comes, we'll let her get
Oh,
into
that's
all of
why we're
that.
doing it. I forgot. I knew there was a point. I forgot that was the angle. I mean, of course, I'd never seen it before. I literally finished watching it like 25 minutes ago. Um,
I hadn't seen it before either. And she was just aghast that I hadn't seen it. And she started to drag me a little bit. But in 1986, I was a toddler. So
yeah,
it's
same.
she agreed that it's fair that I wasn't into it
Hello,
yet.
Dragon Feather.
Hello, Dragon Feather.
Oh no, we've seen it now. We've seen it now. Um, yeah, I was actually going to look for information about the hows and the whys that this came to be. Um,
The house and the
Yo, Peter Griffin, there's so much going on right now. I tried to watch it yesterday, but I got home late and then I was like 20 minutes in and I had a conference today, so I didn't get to like do my double watch. I always get A's, so watch me nail this stream. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so today's the first time I watched it as well. Even though we've been talking about doing this movie for years, I still just never got around to actually watching it until today. I was gonna
Because
watch
it's
it
not
yesterday.
free.
Yeah, I had to rent it.
Oh yeah, to rent it. Shame on you, streaming platforms.
Yeah, show Prince some love.
For real. But maybe that's why it's not on streaming platforms. Maybe he was like,
That's a good point. That is a
Yeah.
really good point.
In which case, huzzah! You got us to pay for it. And so did the women in the movie.
Do you want to talk about the movie itself, and then we'll talk about International Horse Day when Cinnamon gets
Yeah. Yeah.
it? It was very 80s. I'm not mad at it.
Okay. So I started watching it last night. Open, black and white, very beautiful shots. Yeah, maybe that's why I feel about this movie. Gowns, beautiful gowns,
Beautiful
but
gown.
beautiful shots. And I was like, "Oh, this is so enchanting." There she is.
There's our Cinnamon Love.
So enchanting. And then I was like, okay, you got me. I'm drawn in, but I had to go to bed, so I paused, and then I continued today. Um, yeah, I will say that I feel like it's a vanity project for sure, and I respect that.
I respect it. Let's bring on
Yeah.
Cindy so we can get her take on all of it.
You
So
ready? She looks gorgeous.
introducing for her first 30 Tuesdays is our lovely dear star of offense, Cinnamon Love.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
Cindy.
Hi.
Sorry I was late. I was actually watching Under the Cherry Moon.
Also, hello, AK. Say
Hello,
hi to
AK.
all of you guys. Thanks for joining. Those earrings are fire.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
they
you.
are.
125th Street.
Every time I compliment you on jewelry, you're always, that's what you say.
Yeah.
You want to come on a shopping spree. Shopping spree with you.
Right outside the Starbucks always has the best jewelry.
I know exactly what table you're talking about.
Mm.
I know the exact table you're talking about.
It
And
always
yes,
has so much good stuff. Oh my God, it's
yes,
so
they
good.
do.
I need to go do some summer shopping,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you all. So, Nikki, were you familiar with Under the Cherry Moon?
I was just saying that I finished watching it for the first time like 25 minutes ago.
Oh
I'd
my
never
God.
seen it. I didn't realize when it came out, and then Tanya just told us the year, and I was like, oh, I was also a toddler. So yeah, I didn't until you mentioned that you wanted to do it on the stream. I'd never heard of it before either.
Same.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Everyone always talks about Purple Rain as like this iconic piece of cinema that he did. And we all, and how bad Graffiti Bridge was, which was very true. Like it was an awful movie. But this movie gets so much like people it at the time that it came out, it got so much flack. I was actually watching the Siskel and Ebert review of it earlier because you can find it on YouTube, and they hated this movie, and it's so
Wait,
funny.
can we pause for 1 second for the young people in the audience who don't know who they are?
Siskel and Ebert? Oh my God.
That's
Is that a thing anymore?
Probably not.
I think one of them died or something.
I do remember one of them died. Siskel and Ebert were film reviewers, and you knew if a movie was good or bad, or did not care what they thought. It was like a thumbs up, thumbs down, and
it was pre-Rotten Tomatoes.
Pre-Rotten Tomatoes, exactly. They were Rotten Tomatoes.
They were Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. They were. Rotten Tomatoes was based on what they were doing, and it was on television. So they would come on at night and they would review movies, and they'd give the thumbs up, thumbs down on whether it was good or not. And like all reviewers, they had a very, because they were two white men, and actually they were both journalists. They were both film reviewers out of Chicago. One wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times. The other one wrote, I think, for the Chicago Tribune. And, they were two cishet white men talking about movies. So when it came down to, as the same as it is today, when it comes down to like Black film, like, you know what I mean? Or Black artists, you have to take what they say with, what they said with a grain of salt. But they were the originators of the film reviews that got like this kind of, that kind of attention. Yeah.
I'll say real quick, I'm going to put the AK's comment back up.
That
was in living color.
That was the living color.
Right. We're going to have to keep explaining
references. Yeah.
That's our last explanatory comment. Now, after that, you guys know you have to Google. Those two were free.
Yeah.
So I definitely can tell it has like cult classic vibes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
One of the things that I love about this film that I think a lot of people didn't get is that, or that they missed, is that sorry, I'm like burning incense. Sorry. There's no fire. There's no fire. Got to switch vibes. But yeah, it was one of the things that I loved about this film is that, so often when you get films of the rich white man, with the poor, usually street-based sex workers, right? And so it's always who like saves them, like, it's the Pretty Woman story, and
it made me think of Pretty Woman.
Yeah, there are so many of these stories that we get. Like, I mean, Anora just won at, this year's Oscar for best film. And, there's always these stories of the rich, wealthy white man who rescues the young sex worker, or they fall in love.
The hoe into the housewives.
Make the hoe into the housewives. and I love the fact that this story, centers the male gigolo, right? It's like, and back in the day, gigolo was the term that they used for men who had sex with women, for money. And, but you don't get a lot of stories that talk about male sex workers in this way. And the fact that he did, he definitely was going for that like art house film vibe. And it's funny because I'm thinking about, I was just rewatching the Siskel and Ebert review, and they were talking, one of them was saying that he was in the theater, and there were Black women who were like, well, why are there no Black women in this film? And as I'm watching like the opening sequences, there actually are Black women in the film. Like there are Black men in the film too.
One of his clients is an older Black woman.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, and there was this thing about, well, why does he not, did he decide to do it in France when he doesn't even speak French? And it's like, how do you know he doesn't speak French? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, but the character, and I think it gave a lot, like there's a detail that I was looking at earlier that I had missed for one of the many times I've seen it before. But the car that he's driving is actually a Buick Wildcat, which was not sold in Europe at the time. And so like thinking about like the idea that this black musician, would have had to have shipped this luxury Buick car from the US to the south of France for, while he was there. It's like the amount of money he would have had to spend to have his car. And and also as a Midwesterner, I grew up in Michigan, so I grew up in Flint. So it's like, I grew up with Buick. And so it's like the idea, it's like this node to the working class, Black experience of driving a Buick. Like even if you're in a foreign country, you're gonna have your car there. You know what I mean? It's such an interesting way of like, reminding people of what it means to be a working class person, and and what wealth looks like for working class people, especially in comparison to this extreme wealth of all of these like white oligarch types that are that summer in the in Monaco, like, or the south of France, like super interesting.
Wait, so can you tell us about the first time that you saw this movie? Like, and maybe about the hype around it too, because it's like this is a big deal, a Prince movie coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I was 13 years old when the movie came out, and I can't really, I was a diehard Prince fan from very early on. I don't really remember the first time I saw it, but I want to say I snuck off to see it in the theater with friends, because we weren't, I wasn't allowed to date, and of course, my friends and I, we would all meet up to go to the theater, and then our boyfriends would meet us there, and so like so that we could covertly go and see our boyfriends. But yeah, for me, like the idea of, because I was an art, I was a theater kid, I was into art, I was into music. I discovered, I came across Prince during when Controversy first came out. And so I actually, like, I didn't get to see Purple Rain in theaters, but I did go, the first time I saw him live was a Purple Rain concert. So I actually was at that famous Detroit Purple Rain show that he put on, that people often talk about. My uncle took my cousin Erica and I to this show. And so but I missed it in theater. Like I saw it later, like on whatever it was on, like VHS or television or whatever it was. But there wasn't, I want to say there wasn't as much hype about this film as there was about Purple Rain. Like people just didn't get it. Like it was a weird second film that he was doing. Like people didn't understand the black and white, the concept of the black and white film. For me, like as someone who had been into like, all of the, I was, into a lot of the early black and white films with like, Eartha Kitt and I'm trying to think of names right now. I haven't taken my ADD meds today, but when I think about all of the big black star, like film stars of like the 60s, and all of these like love stories that were in black and white, like for me, it was like oh, this is an ode to not only those films with people like Harry Belafonte and like, you know, like it was like those
Sidney Poitier and
Sidney Poitier and like, you know, and you know, Lena Horne, you know, whoever, all these people, but also it was like a throwback to these films of like the 30s and 40s where you had these like classic love stories, or even these classic gangster films. You know, it was very reminiscent of, you know, it's like, you know, I was one of those kids who grew up watching, you know, the Christmas movies that would come on, you know, in black and white, as you know, what, you know, every year, you know, it's like, you know, it's like, so that kind of thing was already in my head as an artist, as a burgeoning artist and a burgeoning filmmaker. But to see like there wasn't, I feel like a lot of the conversation that I remember about the film was a lot of negative, like a lot of negative blowback from people who just didn't get what he was doing. You know, it reminds me so much of like how people think of like the sophomore flop in the music industry. There's so much pressure on people to do things, to do a really good second project. And I think that for this film, it's like, you know, it's the comparison is so unfair because there's this semi-autobiographical film, you know, Purple Rain, and you know, that really centers trauma, you know what I mean? And you know, the trauma and, you know, and domestic violence and, you know, all, you know, and all of these things that everybody loves, but the love story that, you know, that talks about this class difference, that people didn't like it. They thought it was pretentious, you know, it's that he was doing this.
How dare he?
Yeah, how dare he?
How dare he comment on society in this way?
Yeah, how dare he talk about, you know, white women paying black men to fuck them? Like, you know what I mean? There's
that part. That part. Yeah. It's supposed to be the other way around.
We don't talk about this.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
When we do, when we do that at the end of the movie, we boil them alive.
Yes, exactly.
That's a real movie and a book, guys. Look it up.
Can we tell people what International Whores Day is? Because Nikki and I did not.
Oh yeah, International Whores Day. It started in Lyon. I want to say Italy. I can't remember. But yeah, it basically, there were these sex workers that took over a basilica to protest in France, I'm sorry, in Lyon, France. And they took over this basilica to protest the unfair treatment and arrest of sex workers, you know, and, you know, on the street. And it was really as a result of that protest, every year since then, people have used International Whores Day as a way of celebrating sex workers and bringing attention to the issues. And, you know, there's, you know, lots of organizations do, you know, there are lots of different ways that people protest. Some people protest in terms of like providing resources and you know, events for sex workers that allow them to be able to get services or to be able to connect or just have a good time. It's a really, I think 3 years ago now, my organization, BIPOC Collective, we threw a health fair in Los Angeles in collaboration with MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and you know, and a bunch of other organizations to bring like health services together for people. And it was a really amazing event. But we've had lots of events with dancers, you know, strippers, and you know, and food and music, and you know, all the things that that sex workers do and love.
And that's what I was gonna say real quick. I think when people say, like, talk about what the term sex worker means, you know, I think people have a really narrow definition of what that is. They might be like, oh, prostitute, and that's where it ends. But talk about that. What, who, what,
Yeah.
Definition
Oh my God. So the term sex work was actually coined by Carol Lee back in the 1970s, the late Carol Lee. She was a sex worker, filmmaker and activist, and a mentor of mine. She coined the term sex work to align the folks who do sexual labor or perform sexual labor with other workers' rights organizations as a way of showing solidarity and allowing for larger movement work in legislative spaces and other like movement spaces. And so the term sex work really encompasses all kinds of sexual labor. So that means strippers, street-based sex workers, cam models, porn stars, dominatrixes, fetish models, glamour models who perform, who do nudity or perform sexual labor, folks who are also performing like touch-based sex work, which could be prostitution, or also like dominatrixes, right? So
yeah.
But it ranges, it encompasses all kinds of sex work in order to allow people to, one, find solidarity amongst each other, and then also to organize around the labor rights issues of our industry.
I love that.
Yeah. And also, like, for marginalized people, often folks work across a spectrum of sexual labor. So you might find, like, if you might find that Black trans sex workers, or cis het white, cis het women who, Black women in the business, or migrant sex workers may do touch-based services, like whether it's a street-based sex work or escorting, but they might also dance at a club. They might also cam. They might also have an OnlyFans. Like they may work across a wide range of sexual labor in order to make ends meet. It kind of when you think about, like, from a business, a lot of business philosophy talks about how you should always have 7 forms of income in order to, like, always have these fluid income streams. And it's the same thing for a lot of sex workers in general, but particularly for marginalized people, because there's the racialized sexism often dictates that it's hard for people to make enough money to sustain themselves in any one particular place. And so we often work across a spectrum of different types of labor, like, concurrently, in order to earn enough money to support ourselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think people have a hard time wrapping their head around that. It's just like, okay, like me, Tanya, and I, we work in the music world, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, you might play gigs with this person. You might have your own band that tours. You might be putting out music. You might be, like, selling merch. These are all these different ways that you can make income. Like, I film shows, I edit stuff, like all these different ways to be able to support yourself. And there's no difference.
Exactly. It's the same. I mean, there's at any point in time in my life, it used to be a lot different, but there's at any point in time in my life, I might be doing, cam and do phone sex and have my, run my OnlyFans and do porn and see clients and like, you know what I mean? And so it's like, there's, and it's like you get a little bit of money here and you get a little bit of money there. And it's similar to, like, how content creators now, they may be on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and then they're also doing consulting work for other folks looking to get in the business, and they're doing products, promoting products, and maybe they, if they're lucky enough, they're also doing interviews, and then they're doing the, it's like there's so many different facets of the business.
Yeah.
I have a question. So people know I grew up in Germany, and in Germany, like, prostitution is legal, right? Like, there are places, like, the women have, I had never met any men, but, like, they have health insurances. There are safe spaces for them to go. And when I moved here and I found out that wasn't the case, I mean, when I moved here, I found a lot of things that shocked me. And what is this? I think it's like, it's only legal in Nevada, right?
Yeah.
It's only legal in Nevada, and in fact, in some places, like in the District of Columbia and parts of Texas, a first time arrest is actually a felony, whereas in other places it's a misdemeanor. So, like in New York, if you get arrested first time, it's a misdemeanor. But in DC, because District of Columbia is federal property, so any crime committed on federal grounds is considered a felony. And in Texas, because of their because it's Texas, it's like the first time usually is as a felony. Louisiana also used to have they used to have a separate charge called crimes against humanity that was originally created to target gay people, and so that it's been repealed in recent years, but there was a time when people were getting arrested for prostitution. Instead of being charged with prostitution, they were being charged with crimes against humanity, which makes it to where which is a felony, and also would require that they be registered as a sex offender. And also, like in a lot of states, like, in some states, like in Nevada, because in Nevada, prostitution is illegal. Prostitution is legal only in the brothels and only outside of Clark County. So, like within Las Vegas, prostitution is actually illegal. And what they do is, like, and also in Nevada and in Las Vegas and in a lot of other places, when you are arrested, some states will require that you be tested for HIV, and like, you have there's no say in it. It's a part of the arrest. And then if you are arrested, if by chance you test positive and you get arrested again, even if you're on antiretrovirals, which make you undetectable and unable to transmit, they can charge you with a felony. And so there are some places, like I want to say in New Hampshire, there was a judge a few years ago who decided that he would not prosecute like prostitution offenses at all in the event of a sting where there was no actual prostitution that was happening. And so because a lot of times people get caught up in prostitution stings that are where no crime has actually been committed. Right. It's like, and so there are some judges that are pushing back and saying, well, if it was a sting and they actually weren't there was no crime, they didn't commit a crime, so I'm not going to prosecute them and like have this on their record when they didn't do anything, like, you know what I mean? So, it's really unfortunate, because the reality is that most people who are arrested under prostitution, most people who get arrested for prostitution tend to be Black and brown women, trans folks, migrants. Like, those are the folks who are arrested the most for prostitution. And and often what happens is that the law enforcement is using anti-trafficking funding for prostitution arrests. So a lot of times when you see on the news where people have they'll show where they did like this anti-trafficking sting, but then when you read the article, it'll be like they arrested, six prostitutes and 3 or 10 sex workers and 11 clients, and it's
let all the politicians go home. No, I'm kidding.
Right, but it's like if they're sex workers, then they're not being trafficked. They're not being trafficked. Like, you know what I mean? But they're allowed to use this anti-trafficking money for rescue. Right. And then they go out and they arrest consensual, workers, mostly Black and brown women.
Well, since we're talking about some of the legal stuff, like we'll talk about the movie in a second, but I think this is just, I'm fascinated by all of these things. Can we talk about some of the legislative stuff that you've been involved in? Because you've been to DC.
Oh my gosh.
And
you're everywhere.
Yeah, I've actually been taking a break for my mental health. but yeah, I've been working with Decrim NY for a couple of years now, which is doing like local and state legislation. We're trying to get a bill passed called the Stop Violence Against Sex Workers Act here in New York, and it is a there are a lot of like antiquated laws that are still on the books. One of the pieces of the Stop Violence Against Sex Workers Act is to repeal an archaic statute that prohibits sex workers from living together, because it's like the idea that two or more sex workers living in a house, it becomes a brothel. And so there's this brothel law that makes it illegal for people to live together, which
I think that's a thing in Florida.
Isn't that crazy too? Because like if you're gonna like take this from a Christian perspective, that would be church.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think that's a thing in Florida. If I remember correctly, when I went to college in Florida, they had frat houses but no sorority houses.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of places with that. And the thing is, like, people tend to live with people in their community, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's like you have two friends that will live together, maybe they met at, maybe they're both bartenders or they're waitresses at whatever, and they live together, and they have this, or they met at college or whatever the thing is, right? People tend to live with people in their community. And so, I mean, like, if the rent wasn't so high and they weren't hoarding, like, apartments, like,
we'd all live alone.
We would all live alone, but we can't
I'd have a vacation apartment.
Yeah.
Right. I'd have a vacation apartment, but we don't have that. And so, like, there's like, that is one of the many pieces of this bill that we're trying to get repealed.
Wow.
So I've been doing that work. I've also been working with Free Speech Coalition on occasion. They are the anti-censorship organization for the past 30 years in the adult industry, in the mainstream adult industry. And I went to DC with them a couple of years ago, 2023, to talk to both, folks on both sides of the legislature about banking discrimination against sex workers.
I've talked to you about that before.
Yeah.
Not with banking, with Airbnb.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the banking issue is like a big deal because it puts people at risk for exploitation. Like, if you can't bank, then, people get deplatformed for like basically. So the banking stuff is really complex because it's multi-layered. It's not complex, it's multi-layered. So, like, you can't have like venture capitalists can't invest in porn companies, which means that, like, workers cannot really start their own companies. You have to have like tons and tons of access and money. Like, the only reason why the guy who founded and owned OnlyFans was able to get banking was because his father worked for the Bank of England. And so, but then there's also, like, if people are, there's a tie, like the suspicious activity reports that are used for like anti-terrorism also deals with porn. So, like, if you are getting micro deposits in your account, or if you're depositing too much cash, then the bank can flag your bank account and say that it's suspicious activity. And so if you're like a dancer and you're depositing cash, or if you are, if you're doing touch-based work, or if you are, a burlesque performer, or, or whatever the case is, or if you're a content creator who's transferring, $50 here, $100 there, like, every day, like, all of these things, or if you're a content creator who uses Cash App or Venmo to like sell directly to your clients and cut out the middleman, then all of those micro deposits that are going into your account can flag your account. And there's no like transparency around what the flags look like on your account in order to keep your account. And so because a lot of these third-party platforms are volatile, like, the advice that people are often given is to transfer money as soon as the credit cards have clear, so that if you ever lose your account, then you don't have to worry about losing the money, right? So people, and often, like, for the more marginalized folks who are who are vulnerable, who might be unhoused, who might be low income or working class, then, they're as soon as the money becomes available, they're going to transfer the money. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, if it's, they need it to be able to take care of to live, to take care of their basic needs. But those micro accounts flag the account, and you get enough of these SAR reports, and they can close your bank account. And then how do you bank? You know what I mean? How do you get access to, how do you cash how do you get a deposit from an account that you are getting? Or if you have to use a prepaid debit card, you're being exploited with extra fees. Or there could be another person who can come in and say, I'll hold your money for you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it exposes people to a lot, to exploitation. And also, everything is digital these days. So it's like, how do you pay your rent? How do you go to your, how do you tap your Omni card? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you get, it really like pushes people further and further to the margins, and makes it to where it's so easy for people to fall into exploitive situations. Yeah.
Wow. So fucking.
It's hard out here for a sex worker.
I also work with Freedom Network, which was the first anti-trafficking organization to come out as pro sex work, and they provide, it's not exactly policy work, but it is in that vein. Like, it's I'm on the steering committee for I'm not the steering committee. I'm on their survivor advisory group for a survivor reentry program that does record expungement and vacatures and sealing records for folks who were criminalized during their trafficking experience. And that's probably one of my most favorite projects that I work on, because it is really necessary for folks to be able to have those records cleared so that they can get access to things. Often when people are arrested, in a lot of these situations, it can, the arrest, depending on the type of arrest, like let's say a felony arrest, or particularly if they were being forced to do credit card fraud, or to do drug muling, or whatever the case might be during the context of their trafficking, those things can prevent them from being able to get access to SNAP benefits, student loans, public housing, things that are necessary for folks to be able to get on their feet and to not reoffend and not go back to prison. And so being able to work on this project and making sure that the project is truly accessible for the folks who need it the most is definitely, it's like one of my favorite projects in general. Yeah. Formally requesting a future stream. Gotcha. Okay.
Well, we've been meaning to have Cindy on here for years, so it's just taken us this long.
This is the first.
Yeah, this is just the first.
Yeah,
we had to break the seal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what did you think about about Prince and what's his name? Jerome's portrayal of sex workers? It's like one of the, one handles the money and one handles the draws.
Yeah. One handles the money, one handles the girls. I mean, I love the fact that they had this as a duo, because often sex workers do work in tandem, and sometimes sex workers do have like a friend who will manage their bookings, right? It's like, if you are, it's like, I know for me personally, like whether it's managing my OnlyFans or managing my social media or screening my clients, like I've always found myself being able to focus on being in the moment when I don't have to do the admin. Admin is trash. Like, way
to take you out of it.
It is absolutely trash.
It's so hard to be creative when you have to do all those other things. We see this with artists all the time.
Exactly. And so I think that it's very right on that here's that, Jerome plays Tricky, plays his, plays the assistant, it's like they're friends, they go way back. This is his boy. He trusts him. He knows what he's, he knows what kind of money they, it's like they live together. They got to pay the rent. They know how much money needs to be made. And he knows him. So it's like, it's so easy for him to do the negotiating for him and, and kind of, break the, make sure that folks that he can be the entertainer. And the fact that is playing this double role where he's both the musician and providing sexual labor to these rich white women, it's like he has to be able to be creative in these moments, right? It's like he wants to be able to focus on creating the vibe, creating the mood, setting the mood. And when we think about musicians and DJs also, like, I remember having a conversation many years ago with Mr. Len from Company Flow, and he was talking about how a DJ's job is to set the mood and get guys laid at the end of the night, right? So it's like, a good DJ will like create the flow throughout the night where it's like you get people dancing and then you get them close and then you get them a little closer. And then at the end of the night, you get to seal the deal, right? And
that last song is clutch.
That last song is clutch. It's like, it's the last one. You gotta make a move.
You seal the deal.
And seal the deal. And one of the things that Prince does in this movie is he shifts and changes the vibe, like consistently, to get people up and moving. Like there's the scene in the restaurant where they're playing this classical music over dinner and they break out the boombox and they're like, we're going to play. And they start playing Girls and Boys and they get everybody up and they're dancing. Right. And so it's like, it's a similar kind of thing, but he also creates the vibe everywhere he goes. And when I think about like when I was in my 20s or 30s, like me and my girls, we were the party. Like when we showed up to the party, we were the party, right? And so I love the way that they bring the party everywhere that they go. Like, and a part of that is, okay, Caroline, a part of the way that they bring the party is also to attract the ladies. And I love the fact that they are being, just by being themselves, they allow the women to come to them, not just so that they could just get laid, but so that they can make money, which is ultimately what they're doing. And you could go to any nightclub in any major city on any given night, and you can watch the girls on the floor, or you watch the dolls on the floor, like having a good time and bringing attention to themselves, and just watch. I mean, or even just walking by the VIP booths, and and suddenly the guys are like, yeah, you, like. It's a very similar approach that they took in order to show how easy it is that people with wealth will part with their money in order to have their sexual needs met.
Yeah.
It's so funny. You just reminded me of one time when I was a teenager. I was in Jamaica in Montego Bay, and I went to a ladies' night, and it was near the hedonism resort. I did not know what hedonism meant. Just didn't know the word.
Okay,
that's where this is going.
Tell everybody about what hedonism is.
Yeah, I was like, what does hedonism mean? I don't know, whatever. It's a hotel. So what I didn't realize was ladies' night was kind of like an unspoken code.
Yeah.
Nobody told me. I was like 16, and I found out that ladies' night was sex worker night.
Yeah.
And it was like a bunch of like old white male tourists and young Black Jamaican sex workers. And they were working. Yeah. And so of course people kept thinking I was working too. And I was so scared. I was like, I want to go home. But you just reminded me of that. Like,
yeah.
Like there was a DJ and he set a vibe, he set a mood. And, the night started off as just like getting drinks and, dancing. And then as the mood kind of changes, people started pairing off, and then they started going to dark corners. And then like panties started coming off, and that's when I started being like, I don't understand what's happening in here. And I saw a lady wash and dry her crotch in the sink and then dry it with the hand dryer. And I stood there like like but I had never had any experience. Like, I was a churchy girl. Like, I had never had any experience like that before. And I was afraid of ladies' night for a long time after that, because I was like, that's what
rightly so. Rightly so.
And it's interesting too that I'm so glad you brought up Jamaica, because it's, in a lot of island countries, particularly Jamaica and other places, like there are a lot of white Western women who travel to these countries for the purpose of sexual tourism with Black men and boys, very similar to how, we see a lot of, white men who travel to like Thailand, for children, and other countries as well. And the same thing happens with Black men, like, you see who are selling sex to these white Western women.
We used to call them rent-a-dread, because because they were not actually Rastas, but like these white women, largely from the UK and America and Canada, largely, they wanted like this stereotype Jamaican guy. And so they would have locks, even though they were, and this is back when like really only Rastas had locks, but like they didn't, they just grow locks. And so just like as a thing, and we would see them all, like whenever I used to visit Montego Bay, I would see them, and we used to kind of laugh it off, and we were like, oh, there goes another rent-a-dread, because it just looked like a couple who just completely did not match.
Right. Exactly.
And you would see the same guys with just different women. To go back to the movie, like, it's very much the same kind of thing. It's like, here is a Black American man who is, when we think about sexual racism and the way that the phenotypes of Black American people are, are closer, tend to be closer to whiteness, right? In terms of way that our faces are shaped, and the shape of our eyes and our noses and our lips and our mouths and it's like all of the things. It's like it's like the value that white people place on the way we look. And Prince actually talks about that in the movie. Like, there's a moment when he's in the bathtub, and he and Tricky are talking about Mary Sharon, and he's like, butterscotch and chocolate. Who's she gonna go for, butterscotch or chocolate, right? Like, they're acknowledging the way that colorism plays into the white woman's fantasy of being able to be with a Black man, but also not that kind of Black man.
Not really.
Not really, like, and so there's this I love the way he plays with the stereotypes around sexual racism, and this idea that white women will pay to be satisfied, white women whose husbands are not around, or they're off doing business, or they're they already have a lover, but they want to have that there's something that's missing, and what's missing is a big Black, like,
you can say it.
We'll say it all.
To be able to have that, to be able to talk about that, and show the length that white women will go to in order to possess Black men in this way, or even to set them up for for something bad to happen to them, like her sending him off to her his lover's house while
where she knew her dad was going to be there.
Her dad was going to be there. There's a lot to be said there.
So someone asked about favorite themes.
Dragon feather. Yeah.
About favorite what?
A favorite scene.
What is a favorite scene? I can't find the question. Oh, there it is.
I got it. Okay.
What is everyone's favorite scene in the movie? Ooh.
You know what? Listening to us talking about about Tricky and Christopher, when I first the movie started, I was enchanted. I was oh, because I knew nothing about it, so I was oh, it's black and white. This is so cute. I cinematically, I thought everything was really well done. But there's that part where he's where in the beginning he's playing at the piano, and and Tricky just keeps sending him notes. Notes. And I was getting it, I could sense, I felt the frustration. I was what the fuck's going on? But then I realized, I was oh no, he's the money guy. He's what are you doing? You're fucking it up. You can't do that anymore. You gotta switch the vibe. That was
at first I didn't know where the notes were coming from. And then I realized I could see in the background him tapping the waitress and writing on the napkin. And I was oh, is that the manager? Okay.
Yeah. Oh my god!
I think my favorite scene was the Recasto scene.
I love that scene.
One, because now I know where that meme comes from.
Yes.
And two, I just loved how they were just having such a good time laughing at how clueless she was.
Yeah.
You know, here you are allegedly trying to woo her, you're trying to get her money, but you cannot resist capping on her. And I was that is the blackest thing. I can't. We take nothing seriously. You know, we're gonna find a trick in everything. And so here's this woman who you're trying to seduce. You're trying to get her to like you. Yeah. But now you're making fun of her and embarrassing her and with just with words that she doesn't really know and 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 in a harmless way. But I think that was my favorite moment.
I really like that too, because they're kind of putting in her you're someone who you're pretending to be so worldly, but we all know we were at your party, the most exciting thing you ever did was flash everybody
the audience, right?
I was but you're so sheltered, you don't know everything.
You don't know everything. You know? It's funny because when you think about the time that it came out, you think about the late 80s and this pushback against what was then called Ebonics, right? And this
I was thinking about it the other day. Yeah,
the way that people, I mean, of course now we call it AAVE, but it's back then it's people really tried so hard to be Ebonics isn't a real language, right? And so for them to add that into this scene where it's we're gonna make her not only say the word, but we're gonna show her how she doesn't even know how that she uses this kind of language all it's all the time, it's what I mean, it's she uses it all the time. And so I love that scene also. I don't know. There are so many good scenes in the movie, like cinematically speaking, one of my favorite pieces. I mean, I love when I think about shot lists, that shot of the birds flying off in the very beginning, or even the the women laying in their beds and him, leaving the notes on their pillow number. Because when you think about it, cell phones were not what they are now, and so it's interesting to think about him leaving a note on the pillow as opposed to a business card, which also I loved this. I love this scene where he slips his business card into the tarot cards. To marry, I love that. It's such a timestamp of how people communicated back then, as opposed to now it's let me get your Instagram, let me get your phone, let me get your phone number. But to be able to the handwritten note, is really means a lot for me.
Yeah, Caroline, it's just those are things that don't happen anymore.
No,
somebody's. Yeah, there were some boys used to prank call my parents' house. They were not. It's always at 2:00 in the morning, and then you get in trouble.
And then you get in trouble. There are just so many great scenes. I love the whole chase sequence. Trying to get away, mostly because this idea of the white people as the gangsters and thugs, I think was really, because they kind of lay the foundation for that early on when during her birthday party, someone mentions her father as being this bad guy, and then later to like have them like chasing him with guns. I love the fact that they turned it into this like chase movie where he's like running for his life, like literally. But also this dynamic of who's really the criminal here, right? When you think about like sex work as a criminalized form of labor in the United States, like even though it's legal in France and in other places in Europe, but this idea of like that Prince and Tricky are supposed to be, or Christopher and Tricky are supposed to be the low life, that bad guys in the movie, but here is her father, this wealthy man who clearly has like mob ties or something, and he's like chasing him down with guns and through the scene. I love that.
I think, and also showing just like like a huge commentary on money and what money can buy for you when you have money can buy for you, right? He's like, I think she said that her dad's friend was a chief inspector, and they get to the airport and he's like, oh, well, she went willingly with them, like, can't do shit. But then they went on this chase. He's got the Coast Guard coming after them, and he orders them to shoot, and they shoot. Like,
yeah, like it's money can buy you whatever you want. I mean, which is a statement about what's happening in our country right now, right? It's like that money can buy you a whole country, like if you really want to. So Oh, Caroline says in the comments that them seducing the female landlord when they didn't have the rent and her going for it. Yeah. So I love that scene so much because he gives these like Bela Lugosi eyes where he's like, which is so funny because when I was rewatching it, I was thinking about how, this idea of the Black like voodoo practitioner who's going to stare you down and like force you to succumb to their will, right? Like he starts off and she kind of in the beginning like acts like, whoa, like, are you serious? And then she kind of realizes that it's a joke and she like laughs along with them as they get into the elevator. But I love how he kind of played with that with that, like those kind of historical imagery in film.
And it's something that like I thought about that right away. I was like, oh, Bela Lugosi, Dracula, like that vibe. Or just like even like it's so much film noir when somebody is menacing, like they focus on here. They don't do that the same way anymore. Like I don't think, because eye acting is really difficult and we don't see.
Everybody has Botox, so they can't act with their eyes.
Do it right.
If you can't move your forehead, like
I thought that was like really just. That, like those parts, it's like I think what I enjoyed about this movie is that it doesn't take itself too seriously while still taking a topic that you've probably never thought about and making it like accessible. Like you don't hate them, you don't want to hate them. Like just like with Julia Roberts, you're like rooting for her the whole time.
Yes. That's probably the thing that I like too about the film is, and also why I don't understand why the critics were so up in arms about this film, because it's very clear that they are not taking themselves seriously. Like
it's very campy.
It's very campy. Like they are having a great time. The whole it's so a little lore, a little Sinnamon Love lore. Once upon a time, I was at the Long Beach Pride, and Morris Day and Jerome were performing together. They were doing some music from the time, and I went with a friend, and we were backstage after the show, and I went to introduce myself, and I was like, I'm Cinnamon, and I can't remember exactly. Oh, Jerome says, and I'm Spice, and I was like, well, you'll always be Tricky to me. So and he immediately was like,
Dragon Feather, I think that's true. I will admit, and I was texting Tanya about this, it's like for Prince, like his eyes are just so expressive that it's just, for me, I don't know, there's some people who I just see as a person, and I just like that, like, it was hard for me to see him as like a romantic interest because of that. I'm just like, Oh, he's
He's
just
Prince.
He's Prince.
Yeah.
So that part, maybe I could see that that was where maybe the criticism would have come in, because he's
such.
He doesn't feel like
even
a
at
real
that point,
person.
Yeah, I was gonna say at that
like
point
impossible.
he's already such an icon that you can't imagine him as someone else.
Yeah,
like you just see Prince.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, when I was watching the Siskel and Ebert review, it was so interesting to hear them talk about like how great Purple Rain was, you know, and how it was so, you know, it was so autobiographical and it was so meaningful and all these things that they were saying. And I'm like, his mom was being beaten in this movie. Like, you know, like his dad killed himself in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it's like that's what you consider to be great cinema. Like it was really dark. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like it was to see that people would, that the critics would rather that kind of traumatic story from a Black artist than to see something that is light and social political and funny and has all of, and really stretches the things that he's able to talk about, as opposed to the, you know, the yeah, exactly, Black trauma versus Black independence. And, you know, and the way that people would, you know, the extent that people will go through in order to not only have their basic needs met, but to thrive, right? It's like, if Purple Rain is a story of survival, you know, Under the Cherry Moon is a story about thriving under, you know, under capitalism and economic oppression as a Black man in, you know, in a white world. Yeah.
You know what? This movie unlocked something for me, and I didn't ever know that I wanted to race cars on a horse track. I have new goals in my life. So, if anyone can make that happen for me.
I know. I love it so much. I know. I started watching it late today, and then I was like, I'm going to have to go back and finish watching it. But it's just such a beautiful, I mean, cinematically, it was just incredible. And yeah.
Cinematically, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm glad they did it in black and white.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's also just fun.
Yeah. Even though there is tragedy in the film, but still, like it's a beautiful love story, you know. And I love the fact that they touch on the fact that, you know, you can be a sex worker and still pursue love. Like you can still have the desire for love, like that you're not limited to the scope of the type of work that you do. You know,
it's really important. I was sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's really important. I think there's this concept that, like, oh, because somebody does sex work for a living, there's no way that they can actually access love or have love in their life or deserve love in their life, because
or want it
on things. Exactly.
Yeah, or even want it, like that you only want to you know, to have this sexual exchange, this exchange of sex for money or goods or services. But the idea of being able to actually like have, you know, like to meet someone that you are interested in, even if it's within the context of a working environment, that you could possibly like meet someone and fall in love with them. And I think it's interesting that, like, you know, a lot of the women, not all of them, but, you know, a lot of the women in the movie that were his clients were older women. And Mary Sharon was someone who was his age and was, you know, they had, you know, even though they come from different worlds, like there was an opportunity for them to connect in a way that he wouldn't have connected with these other people. And also, like, she was, you know, was also in a situation where she was being forced to marry someone that she wasn't interested in marrying, and being able to see that, you know, being able to like kind of break through that limitation of who she was supposed to be, and be able to actually have desire, you know, find what she was really interested in. Yeah, I mean, it's something that it resonates with me so often, like refusing to be put in, both of them were refusing to be put in a box based on their particular stations in life, and, you know, finding each other despite their socioeconomic, you know, differences. It's a really beautiful love story at the end of the day.
Let me ask you a question, just because I thought about it. I don't remember the first time I heard the word gigolo, but I was young and I looked it up in the dictionary and I was like, oh, okay. This is how I learned what masturbate was too. Shout out to Purple Rain. Yeah. Yeah. Darling Nikki, scarred for life.
Yes.
But let's say this movie came out in 1986 and it didn't get well received, but like American Gigolo with Richard Gere, everybody loved that movie.
Yeah. But he's a white man. Like, you know what I mean? And black men aren't supposed to be able. I mean, it's really fascinating because this country was built on the forced breeding of Black people, right? Black men and Black women. And so it's like, you know, Black men historically have always been used for sexual labor in this country, but for the profit of somebody else. And the idea that a Black man could be out there, you know, earning money and having sex with white women, you know, in you know, for his own profit, you know, I think was just too much for folks to imagine.
Again, if it was the other way around.
Yeah, if it was a white woman.
Fine.
Yeah.
And the fact they have to put this like, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to say, and the fact that they had to put, like, he put this movie in France for a reason, right? Like, this could not have happened here. He would have been dead the first time somebody found out
There'd be a lynching scene.
Thing, you know? Exactly.
Yeah,
it would have, that would have been the opening scene.
And also, because that was also part of the criticism early, you know, was that the fact that it was in France and that there was, you know, that it was, you know, that it was in France as opposed to here. And but the story actually, it works in France because we're talking about a very extreme wealth disparity, right? We're talking about, you know, not only in terms of the income, but also, you know, there's this legacy when we talk about generational wealth, you know, America is much younger than France is, you know? And so when you think about like this, you know, like the characters in the story, like, you know, Mrs. Wellington and, you know, and also like Mary Sharon's father, you know, this is generational money, right? That we're talking about. Like the guy that they wanted Mary Sharon to marry came from a family of wealth, which is why they wanted her to marry him so that they could merge their family, you know, status and income and reach. And you can't, I mean, to do it here, it would have had to have been like a Rockefeller type of character, like, do you know what I mean? But to do it in France, where you have these palatial homes and you have this, you know, it fit the idea of what they were trying to do, in terms of like showing the not only the wealth, but also, you know, Caroline saying in the comments about how used to treat us better. Like, yeah, it's like a lot of musicians have historically talked about like how they were much better received when they went to Europe, than they were when they, you know, not only musicians, but also like
like James Baldwin and all these people.
Baldwin and like all these people, like musicians, you know, they leave here. And not only early people, but when I think about, what's his name? Erykah Badu's second husband, like, or third
Jay Electronica
left the United States and went to Europe and married a rich white woman, like married an heiress. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, black male musicians have always found money, but also Eve. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like as an artist, as a you know, the ability to leave the United States and find not only acceptance but wealth, and in a place where you're not dictated as much by the limitations of the American social construct of what it means to be a Black person with wealth. You know, it only worked to place it in Europe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of the critics missed this piece of the way that Black artists and musicians have always found acceptance and popularity in Europe, you know, that they didn't necessarily have here. And, you know, it would be interesting. I'd have to go back. I mean, as I'm going back to watch the movie again, like I want to, you know, remember, but I don't think they ever really talked about his work as a musician in the United States in the film. And so it's but it's like, you know, here you have a musician who traveled to Europe and he's working these clubs and these parties and these hotels, and like, and he's a working musician in this film, right? And he's earning a living and supplementing it through sexual labor, which is something
multiple streams of income.
Multiple streams of income. A lot of sex workers do that. They pursue, you know, other dreams, whether it's, you know, whether it's school or other creative pursuits, while you know, providing for their basic needs through sexual labor. So it's a classic sex worker story.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you came on to talk about it through that lens.
Yeah,
I think it makes it an entirely different movie, you know.
definitely.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we finally got you on this.
I am too. I threw some makeup on like 10 minutes ago. I was like, I should probably put some makeup on. I mean,
well, you look gorgeous as usual. Even Jackie, when she came on, she was like, "Who is this beautiful woman on the stream?"
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm
just casually a baddie. Well, don't hang up on me on the stream, but before we go, what do you have to plug so you can drop some links in the chat?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I have a film that came out earlier this year in February called Olivia. I'm not in it. I was an executive producer and creative consultant on the film.
I saw the trailer, but I have not watched it yet.
Yes, the film, folks can find the film at dorselfilms.com. It's called Olivia. It stars Jet Setting Jasmine, Anna Fox. I'm trying to think of who else is in the film. There's like a bunch of people, a bunch of new folks in the film, but it was the first adult film that centers menopause as a part of the theme. Originally, it was a vehicle for me to do as a comeback movie because I haven't shot porn in since 2010, like mainstream porn. And so, but then I got COVID, and so I couldn't shoot. But it was, you know, I was very involved in the process for this, you know, making sure that the script fit the theme of what I was looking for. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about menopause. Originally, the script was going to talk about a woman getting back, you know, getting it was basically like how Stella got her groove back, but you know, it was and you know, my thing was, it's like, well, not every woman is going, you know, not every person with a vulva is going to go through a divorce, but every person with a vulva is going to eventually go through menopause. And you know, I felt like this was a really good opportunity to talk about what the film, you know, to talk about that change in our lives and what it means for our sexuality as well as our careers. The film debuted on channel, I can't remember. It debuted on television in France. It's available in 6 languages on Dorcel's website. It's a really amazing project. I was really happy to be a part of that. So I definitely want people to check that out. I'm currently writing a book about the intersection of non-monogamy and Blackness. And it's not coming out anytime soon, but that's what I am working on right now.
It's a whole other topic. Come back and let's talk about that.
Yeah, when it's ready, we'll come back and talk about it.
Why not into stomach? Perfect.
Oh, we'll get some arcs and then do a book club about it.
Yeah.
Yay! Yeah, but those are the big things that I'm working on. And as always, I'm always raising money for BIPOC Collective. You know, we're trying to, you know, my organization provides resources, you know, one-to-one peer support and resources and therapy services for marginalized sex workers, particularly those who have been impacted by trafficking or gender-based violence, and always trying to raise money. Holla at your girl.
Listen, we're dropping all the links.
Thank you very much. But yeah, that's and I've been raising money for my book. I'm actually traveling upstate New York next week for to Colgate University for the Colgate Writers Conference. It's a book development conference, so I'll be working on my new book while I'm there. I've been raising money. I've got a GoFundMe people can check it out in my links on my Instagram or on my Blue Sky. I'm over at Blue Sky. I used to be on Twitter. Now I'm on Blue Sky because fuck Musk. We don't do Nazis over here. But and people can, I think my pin post on Blue Sky is also the GoFundMe. So if people want to help me write my book, please donate to help me do that. So
yes. Well, Sinnamon Love, the beauty you are, the queen you are. Thank you so much.
I love you so much.
Getting together. I love you. And I'm so happy we finally got to have a chat on a stream. And I definitely think we should do another International Horrors Day. Like, let's just keep it going.
And also, I would love to do. I mean, Tanya knows this about me, but also we can talk more about this offline. Is that, we do our Black History Month Film Festival, and I would love to do a bunch of black and white romances for February next year.
That would be good.
Do that.
I'm with it. I'm always down for a black and white film. And next time, so now you two have to watch Graffiti Bridge. It's horrible, but you have to act.
Well, I know now going in, so
it's not Under the Cherry Moon, but I know somebody in the comments said we didn't even mention the soundtrack. We didn't even talk about the soundtrack.
We didn't talk about the soundtrack. But the soundtrack that could be an episode by itself.
The soundtrack was amazing. Yeah, love it. Yay!
All right, well,
thanks guys for watching.
Don't go anywhere, Cindy. Good night, everybody.
Oh wait, we have things to talk about. We have the book club coming up.
Oh,
we're reading a book. The Shadow of the Eternal Watcher by Josh Mendoza. That is our next book club book. It is going to be a flyer soon. I promise.
I tried.
And it's the Sunday after Father's Day. The 20-somethingth.
Perfect.
Hold on, look at
Stay tuned for a flyer. I don't remember.
The 22nd.
Nope, 22nd.
Not the 22nd. The 29th.
29th. Yeah, June 29th. Shadow of the Eternal Watcher by Josh Mendoza. It is a sci-fi detective story.
Ooh.
Yeah, a little bit of space travel.
So a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
Yeah, that's all we got coming up. We'll have to come up with some other things.
We're reading more books. We'll figure it out.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.